Right, hello there. Nothing special today, just hanging out, just working on some projects or finishing up a project. That's that toilet roll monster that was in the last stream. So yes, you're welcome to just sort of hang out and watch, I guess. But anyway, so setting this pet up from the other day and try to sort out, because as was explained in the previous stream, this pet was rigged and animated before it was correctly set up for IMVU. So doing that after the fact, so adding this armature to the pet can cause problems. So when you import your pets, hello oofing by the way, so when you set up your pets and export them, it can cause issues from the point of view of what IMVU is expecting when you import. So normally when you import, come on, import dialog. What did that do? Normally when you import, you get a selection of skeletons that you can set up. But if you adjust the skeleton, or if you rig the skeleton after the fact, so again, you have your accessory item, in this case it's a pet, you have that set up and rigged before you've connected it to the accessory armature route, it'll give you a set of different options when you come to import. So normally you would choose the lowest, the entry with the lowest number of bones and number of meshes. It's the number of bones in particular that you want to pay attention to. But depending on how the object has been set up, you'll get extra options. And normally what it does is it'll give you lowest and highest. Very rarely does it give you this in between. So you have to watch out for that when you're setting up your accessories. It doesn't matter that this is a pet. It doesn't matter what the accessory is in terms of, well, this is a pet, but if it was a set of earrings, a bracelet, a tail, it wouldn't really matter. On importing to Studio, you'll get these three options, or as many as three options. And that's because IMVU is interpreting the data that's in the FBX in a slightly different way depending on which one of these options it is. So 10 bones is the actual number of bones that are in the skeleton of the original object. 12 bones includes the armature, the accessory armature, and 13 bones is it's a hierarchical thing. So the FBX, I'm not 100% sure on the way that FBX does this, but the FBX tends to consider the identifier for the overall armature as a bone in the hierarchy. So you end up with that being included in this. And that's why it gives us these different options when we import. But what that'll do is let's just set up an action stance.idle. What that'll do is if you select the wrong one, it'll break the animation. So that shouldn't be doing that. It should be doing this. But because the skeletal hierarchy that's generated by IMVU on import is incorrect, we've used the wrong number of bones, not so much the number of meshes, but we've used the wrong number of bones. It omits, I'm not quite sure what it's doing exactly, but it doesn't include one of the bones that are part of the armature, which means that that data is missing from the sequence. And if it's missing, so let's say it's missing the root bone, so it's scrubbing all of that. So it then means that the animation is only relative to this section, which obviously means the playback does that. So on import, you have to make sure that you select the right skeleton. So it can sometimes mean, don't save, a bit of trial and error sorting it out. Selecting the different options and seeing which one works. So, number 6. 0.01. Use 10 bones just to show what that means. Whoops, forgot to set the scale, so that's one ginormous pet toilet roll. That's quite funny. We can scale these after the fact. Where is that scale thing? Or is that only applicable to the avatar? Oh, that's a shame. So we can only scale meshes relative to the avatar, but that's one ginormous pet toilet roll monster. Do that again. So import. That's why we set the scale, actually. So that's why we set the scale when we import meshes using the starter file. So if you've used the starter file, 0.01 scale. So 10, next, import. So if we use 10, it's glommed onto the head bone using the root of the pet. Whoops. So it's used this as the anchor point to which the accessory anchors to the armature, not the armature, the avatar. So that's anchoring to the head bone, which is that bone. Let's just make that see-through. X-ray. So it's anchoring to that bone, and it's using the root of the pet as the anchor. that's why it appears at the head. So if we select the wrong set of bones, that's just a skeleton on its own without the root. And it'll do that with any type of accessory. So I have to close this, don't save, do that again. So we want to try the one with 12 bones. So 12 bones, 2 meshes. 0.01, next, next, next. Hey soup. So that's now in the right place. Well, relative to the anchor point. So again, now it's using the attachment route. So that distance is correct. But we need to check skeleton, femur limit master route. So it's in the right place, but we need to check that the hierarchy is set up correctly. So let's just set up starts dot idle ensemble. Oh, which one is it? Rename. Action.idle, infinite loops, apply, preview. Yeah, so that's the wrong one because, as mentioned, it's now omitting a bone out of the hierarchy and making the playback of that sequence wonky. Unfortunately, we can't. Whoops. We can't really see what bone's missing just by displaying the skeleton, because we can't see the skeletal hierarchy. So let's try the other one. Don't save. So we're importing the same file each time. It's just that the skeleton selection is different. So 0.01. So again, this time we want 13. Let's try 13 bones. So that's brought that in. Let's just, whilst we're on this page, rename the idle animation. This can be anything you want, actually. So it's just being renamed action.idle. Whoops. Yeah, action.idle, just so that if you rename all the actions the same, they'll all be listed. Otherwise, they'll be listed in sequence alphabetically. Whereas if you just rename them based on the name of the name of the action and then action after the end, it renames everything alphabetically. Or not renames, it lists everything alphabetically. So if you do it the other way around, it just makes it easier to organize your project assets. So this top section might be all the actions, meshes, skeletons, images. Right, so create an action, stance dot idle, action, 0 loops, apply. Oh, we also need to set oh no, it's got all smushed up. I think don't save, restart Studio. Hey B, you mean just VR chat? I've looked at it, not really got into it. Right, so let's try that again. So this is one of the, I'm not quite sure what's going on under the hood, but if you, Studio has a similar sort of problem that Classic does when you rework the same file over and over again. So if you import the same file into a new project repeatedly, it can cause problems because the editors don't seem to clear their memory or their cache properly. So the best remedy for that, or the simplest, is just to restart the application and then re-import the file and see if that fixes it. So let's hopefully see if this works. It was tested yesterday offline and it worked, so I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't today. But of course it is Wednesday today, so things don't work on Wednesdays. So rename that. So let's get the skeleton sorted out first. Because it could have got its pants in a twist. Right, so it's in the right place. Action stance.idle ensemble 0 apply preview. What is it doing? It worked yesterday. That is super duper weird. That's distorted the skeleton for some reason. Let's do a proper derive rather than using one that's held in cache. So, main accessories. Empty accessory. Where's the skeleton? Not the skeleton, the glasses. Let's try this to see if it works. So we'll change that. We'll use the same skeleton again. Next. Next. Right, so if you use the empty, your accessory doesn't initially appear. I noticed this yesterday trying this out. So our accessory is missing. It should be somewhere. Should be able to see it. So component, skeleton, because it's not got a node set. Female O3 master root. So that should drop it down, and there it is. Right, so let's rename this asset again. Action.idle. Rename component action. Zero. That is totally weird. So this is IMVU Studio for you. That's I am genuinely flummoxed here. Zero 0.01. Let's try 12. And again, our object doesn't appear because, oh, let's just rename this whilst we're here. Again, doesn't appear because there's no node set, so okay. Action stars.idle. Zero. Apply preview. No, that's wonky as well. This is totally weird. Let's try a different file. The idiosyncrasies of Studio. Oh, hi Roy. Didn't see you there. No, it's not on this one. No morphs. No morphs on this. It's just a straightforward skeletal animation. But the way that the project was set up, originally it didn't have the skeleton set up correctly, so it was modified after the fact. And, you know, as you know, when you do that, it doesn't play ball sometimes. And it's just a question of trying to find which one works. Skeleton. Right, so that's that. Parse.idle ensemble there we go. That's what it should have been doing, honestly. So this is the problem with creating projects with too many source files and trying to remember or figure out which one you're supposed to be using, and I forgot what I was going to say there. Something to do with skeletons, or did I say that? But something skeletons. They're sorting out the skeleton that you've exported it from. No, the files. Too many files. There's too many project files, and trying to figure out which ones to export with the right file and all that jimmery crackery. Hey, Johnson. So now we can fiddle around with the materials a little bit. So let's get, so we can see. So we've got a couple of room selections that IMVU has given us where we can change the room's lighting, because so the default rooms, these two, have two source lights, basically one in the front, one in the back, and they're very bright, so you can't see what you're doing sometimes. But we've got another couple of versions of these, well, of the scene rather than these actual files, but we've got a couple of versions of those with different lighting setups. I think one's just got one light and the other one's with ambient light, I think. Don't quote me on that. But there's, let's turn the skeleton on. Oh, we can't see it, but there's, I don't know how well that will come out in the video, but we can see that's the light source there, that little point, little sphere, and in this room there's only that one. In the other one, don't know if there are any lights in this one at all, and it is just lit by ambient light. Yeah, so I think this one's ambient. So we'll go back to the one with one light. So that just basically makes it easier to... Yeah, no thanks. Where's the... There we go. No bots, thank you very much. That was on Twitch. Yes, so when you are adding, so what we're going to do now is just add some shininess to our materials. So add. So we want the toilet roll. So that's gone super bright because our reflectivity is turned up quite high. So although we've got a relatively dark shininess map, which determines where our shininess appears on our material. Even though we have a dark map, if we have reflectivity turned up, it'll make the thing go full bright like that. So, and I think the default is 50, so we just can turn that down. And and that's why it's helpful to have the room with the one light source, because now we're getting shininess relative to just that one light source. So color. And that makes a bit more sense, or it's much easier to see in this sort of shininess. So the shininess is being highlighted relative to the light being in this direction, whereas if in the default scene we've got the two lights, so it's sometimes difficult to see just how the shininess map is shiny. Say that 3 times quickly. So it's always worth playing around with the different rooms that we've got in our inventories and just using the different defaults. So that's the shininess for that. That's okay. Let's turn that down a little bit. Super. So cast shadows. I don't think those are actually enabled at the moment, but it's worth activating these because subsurface shading, Roy is asking about. That's this one. From what I understand, I don't know if IMVU actually does it technically or whether it's approximating the effect, but what it's doing is essentially, well, let's see if it'll work on this. Might have to change rooms. Oops. See if we can try the ambient one, see what that does. It's supposed to add a sort of glow to materials, but let's do it on the toilet roll skin. Whoops. But yeah, I don't know how clearly that came through, but there was a change, so let me just disable that. It's when used properly, like in Blender, it kind of diffuses the light through something. It makes something look diffuse, so hence you'll often see subsurface shading or subsurface scatter associated with skin, because the skin isn't fully opaque, it's partially translucent, or it's not transparent, it's translucent, so light does pass through it, and subsurface shading is supposed to sort of emulate that translucency. So it does change it, but let's try a really extreme value. I'm not quite sure how well 255, 256, 255. because it doesn't really seem to do anything. So I'm not 100% sure if, although it's available, I don't know how it's supposed to, unless it is relative to, let's add a light source because we were using the ambient light. That is very bright. I don't know actually, it doesn't look. Whoops. I guess it must be tinting it or doing something, but it's not easy to see. But essentially, it's supposed to sort of replicate the effect of translucency of the skin. But I don't know how it's working in Studio at the moment. So yes, it will work well on, you know, your skin textures. But there are a number of features that are available as options but aren't actually active. So it's always a good idea for the moment to turn on, enable cast shadows and receive shadows so that you don't have to go back to those and adjust those settings on your products later on when that is enabled. Because, whoops, obviously I've done that one. Use vertex colors. Because where is that room? Have they removed it? Oh, it looks like they've removed it. There was a room that we could use to see shadows, but it looks like that might have been removed. I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, it looks like they've removed it. That's a shame. Oh no, there it is. So this is what we may eventually see. And we can see that if we disable, let's see what that does. We can see that we lose oh no, it keeps it. Oh, excellent. So I wonder if that's to do with light sources then. So still, it may be worth making sure that these are enabled. Oh, that is one thing actually. So this is a relatively dark room, and it doesn't look as if it's got too much in the way of an ambient lighting source. So it's a low valued light source. So in order to get the shininess to look shiny in this room, we're having to hike up the reflectivity in order to get our metal parts, spiky bits, shiny. But if we bring that into one of the other rooms, it'll blow those out and they'll go really shiny. So that is something that creators are going to have to be keep an eye on, is that these things, these effects, the shininess in particular, they change dramatically depending on the room that you're in. I think this, I don't know if this is part, see if it's in your inventory. It should be, it may be, but I think this is a test room. But it shows what we might, it's called, it's called Tauntaun. It's called Tauntaun Temp. So I don't know if it's available to the, I think it's a test room, so I don't know if it's available in the standard or the download that's available on the website. But it gives us a good idea of what we can look forward to. But as I was saying, we have to be careful with our shininess, because in this room, even though it's a grey room and it looks like it's got a pretty bright ambient, oh, can't affect that, pretty bright ambient, our metal points, our metal spikes are much more shiny compared to the other room. So that's something that we're going to have to keep quite a significant, serious eye on shininess maps, particularly from customers' point of view, because obviously they're not necessarily going to understand why these look shiny, really shiny in one room, but quite dull in another. Right, so let's continue setting up the animations. And hopefully, where's the Sneachu? So this is the one that moves action. Just the once. Yes, yeah, yes. Black leather is going to be, well, anything that's leather is going to be really tricky to work with, because even though you might have your shininess correct in an average room, in a standard room, you know, in a room that you might be testing it with, it'll blow out in a room with bright lighting, which isn't really what leather really does. It always tends to stay quite muted. So that's PVC. It won't matter for that. Things like leather and organic surfaces, they're going to be really tricky to work with the shininess maps. So apply, preview, and then we can test this. Achoo. There, perfect. It needs to be double-sided. So we'll just do different triggers for the same. So yes, I think that's one of the reasons why they've provided, or they will be providing, different rooms for creators to test their products with. But it's going to be tricky from a customer relations point of view, because not only is the lighting and the shininess, not only is lighting going to affect shininess based on what's in the room, but also lighting, accessory lights, you know, lights that people add to their accessories, to their avatars as accessories. So let's change the rest of these. Oh, that's a skeleton, so let's just call all that skeleton.rig. Right, so that's renamed those so that they're much more manageable. I mean, even to the extent that, I wonder if you can do this. So this is being used. Where's it gone? Mesh.color, there it is. So it looks like you can rename things whilst they are actually being used, or whilst they are actually assigned. Right, so yes, absolutely. It's as Roy's saying, it's much better to rename assets in Studio than it is in Classic. In Classic, you had to open the file in the assets folder or the project folder that IMVU is saving, and then update the project. But this is so much easier. Whoops. So you can use different triggers to trigger the same animation. There have to be different actions though, because we can only have one trigger per action. But you can trigger that animation as many times as you want using different words or phrases. So it's the same animation, but just different triggers. Let's see if that one will loop. How long is that? So from 7:25. But we still have to keep pressing, whenever we make a change, we still have to keep pressing the preview button. Oops. Okay, so that one doesn't loop too well either, because so setting the animations up in Blender, there's a space for blending in and blending out, so the animation doesn't play immediately from frame 1 to the end. So you can set up your animations to do that or not to do that. It's not particularly important either or. But, so what were we just looking at? Happy. So this one does. It goes all the way from start to finish. So frame 1, frame 40, those are the same. So frame 1 to 39, let's try that. See, so it shouldn't. There shouldn't be that weird transition. You can tell. So that little hiccup is where it's looping, but it's not set to do that. It should loop. So let's just set that up in Blender 40. So that's our frame range, end and start. So that's going to play from frame 1 to frame 40. So press space bar. See, it loops perfectly fine. But the FPS is set to 30, which should match what's going on in IMVU. But we get this little weird hiccup. So it looks like it loops, starts to loop or re-loop the file at around frame 25. Let's try that again. Maybe not. Oh, you're very welcome, Ames, Andrea. So that's very weird. Happy. See, it hiccups. So it's hiccuping when the toilet roll is shaped that way. So if we look at what that is in Blender, so that's going to be either frame 5 onwards or frame 25 and onwards. So maybe, so frame 5, 25, those aren't quite the same. So that's a little trick actually. They are the same-ish, but there's just a slight little change in the tail of the toilet roll. So one of the things that you can do when you're doing your animations is that, so this sequence is really just 20 frames long. So from there to there. But if you were to export that and loop it in IMVU, it would be very obvious that it was only 20 frames long, because it's playing the same set of frames over and over and over again. So this little trick that you can use is, I mean, you don't need to use it too extensively either, because, so we've got frame 1, frame 20, which is the middle, and then frame 40, which is exactly the same as frame 1. So to break up that looping, well, it's a looping art, it's an artifact essentially. You know when something is looping. So what you can do is duplicate the sequence. So we can duplicate frames 1 to 20 and drop them in for another loop within Blender or your app of choice. And then what you can do with the second set is make minor changes. You can do them a bit more obvious than were done here, but you can make minor changes so that as the sequence plays through, it's not quite so obvious that it is looped, but you then get an extended animation sequence. So again, your looping isn't so obvious because you're only looping 20 frames or half the sequence, and you do some changes here or in the middle, doesn't matter where it is, but you break up that impression, or that what's the word, because it's an exact duplication. You don't want to do an exact duplication, but you can use those. You can duplicate a frame range to create an extended range, but you want to change what goes on with each subsequent duplication so they are not exactly the same as the original. It's all about breaking the illusion of repetition, basically. So let's try frame 5 to 25. Frame 5 to 25. See, that worked. So it's I mean, that's one of the other things as well that you can do with your animations, is that if you do this, so we've got sequence 1, well, original and then duplication. But we don't necessarily have to play the full sequence. We're not obligated to do that. We can choose, because we've done that, because we've looped, we can choose any set of frames within the range that we've got. So we could probably use frames 10 and 30, so that becomes our range, instead of 5 to 25. I mean, if we wanted to, we could go from 1 to 20. Obviously, if we shorten the sequence from the original, we're making the possibility of the repetition more obvious. So we have to be careful. So let's go with 3. And of course, the more frames you cut out of your sequence, the longer the loops, because you have to compensate for what you've lost. That's better. Thankfully, the looping isn't quite so obvious. So we've got stance.idle as our primary sequence, and that's just playing a breathing. So the pet's relaxed, it's breathing, and that's set to loop infinitely. So whenever we've got one of our trigger sequences, that overrides temporarily the default idle. And then just returns back to the stance.idle. So that's happy. What else was there? Oh, sad. We might have to do the same thing with sad. Does that return properly to idle? Yeah, it doesn't look as if that's returning back to idle properly. So let's take a look at sad. Yeah, so that's another sequence that's from start to finish. So frame 1 to 60. And one of the other things that you will have to watch out for, which I've just noticed, and this may be why the animation sequences don't return back to their defaults properly. So let's just put frame 1 to 60. Let's actually name or number the frames. Yeah, so one of the things you want to watch out for when you are doing your animations is to make sure that wherever you have a keyframe, you mark all the bones. Otherwise, IMVU has a habit of, it doesn't ignore them. Doesn't ignore them exactly. It just, if there's no animation data associated with these frames, it will likely use whatever is set at these frames, which, because there's no data here, it'll just carry it through straight to the end, and whatever should be playing at these frames might be omitted, so that when it resets, it doesn't, well, when it resets to another animation, it doesn't properly or fully reset the entire sequence. Because that animation data or that pose data is missing from wherever it kicks in. So we can see the loo roll isn't quite shaped the way that it should be for the idle animation. So now it's returned back to its proper shape. So that's something that you have to watch out for as well. Whoops. So let's try a blend in, blend out. Reset. Yeah, it's not doing it as well as it should be, but it's passable. Yeah. Might need to take a look at that. Oops. Does help if you type the trigger. Yeah, you see it's not resetting properly. I've noticed that some of these more vigorously animated sequences, so if it animates perpendicular to the way that the skeleton is set up, so it goes up and down or front to back, it seems to work okay. But if you go off kilter, it has problems resetting the sequence. And I've no idea why. So we can do we can see, so it's now not resetting at all properly. Yeah, it's very weird. Because it should. There's nothing there that prevents it from doing that. So the walk sequence. So that's another one that starts at frame 1, ends in this instance at frame 60. So that's all it does. Frame 1 and 60 are exactly the same. But again, it seems to be getting smushed. It's kind of, so it's pulled up the bottom. Whilst keeping the upper half. reset. So it could be that, as I was saying earlier, there are some keyframes, not keyframes, there are some channels missing some pose or keyframe data. So those should be in place, but they're not, and that could very well be why it's not resetting properly. So I don't know why it would be doing it for that one, but for the walk, because we've got these two frames missing at the end here, so it's carrying through whatever pose information. It's not necessarily from this frame, but it'll be carrying whatever pose data is probably on these latter frames before it resets. So see, even I do that, even I miss these, being the super duper expert. But it should see, that resets it. So let's look at sneeze. Yeah, see, that's probably what's causing the problem, is that it's missing some keyframes where they're needed. So obviously this is a pet, but it applies across the board for anything that is going to be animated. Let's just keep an eye on your keyframes and make sure that your channels contain all the data they need, particularly at frames 1, well, at the start frame, whatever that is, frame 1 normally, and then your end frame, whatever that is. In this instance it's 59. So let's just do the last one, I think, which is, oh, have we already done that? No, we've done that. That's the last one. So walk is the last one. So we can remove that. So let's save this file, save as. Yeah, weird. I'll have to look at that. Double check offline. Sneeze. Chew. No. 9. 9 Mine Capitan. Never. Yes. Yep. Yes. Haha. Heh. Hee hee. Tee hee hee. Happy. Sad. So that's the one that's broken, so make a note of that. And walk. That's the other one that's broken. So that's that project almost sorted out. I'll have to look at those, see what's going on. but yes, sad toilet roll is sad. Sniff, sniff. Should do one for depressed as well, I guess. So save that. Yeah, I'll have a look at those offline, those two animation sequences, and see if it is the keyframes missing. I suspect it is, but I'll have to sort it out and see. Right, so we'll call it quits there. That's nearly an hour and a half. Thanks for watching, Roy, Andrea, Saint, B, Soup, and Oofing, and Lurkers for lurking. I may be doing another one either tomorrow. So what is it? It's Wednesday today. So I might be doing one either Thursday, Friday, or over the weekend because it's Halloween. I might do a Halloween stream of making something. And we'll make an item that we can do some basic sculpting with. So we'll use Blender's sculpting tools. Whoops. We'll use Blender's sculpting tools to do a bit of sculpting. Just do something very simple and basic. Doesn't need to be complicated. And then we'll export that a little accessory item. So hopefully that will be either Thursday, Friday, or over the week. It might be over the weekend because that's Halloween itself. Is it Halloween? When is Halloween? 29th. 29:30. So yeah, so Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Might do all 3 days, but we'll see. Right, so yep, call it quits there. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we shall see you on the next stream. So bye for now.